You know, in the world of sports, there are players who are great at the game, and then there are the ones who change the game itself, forever. Today, we're talking about the guy who didn't just play baseball, he pretty much reinvented it. Let's dive into the story of the one, the only, Babe Ruth.
You know the face, and you definitely know the nicknames. The Bambino, the Sultan of Swat, George Herman Ruth. This guy was more than just a man, he was a myth. He wasn't just a player, he was one of America's first real celebrities, a guy who was probably more famous than the president.
I mean, even when he failed, it was epic. You gotta love this quote from a sports writer back in 1919. It just perfectly captures that raw, electric energy he brought to every single at-bat. Every time he swung that bat, whether he hit it or not, you could just feel this shockwave go through the entire crowd. The whole stadium just held its breath.
And the stats? Oh man, the stats behind the legend they're mind-blowing. 714 home runs, 7 World Series titles. He wasn't just good, he was the guy everyone else was measured against. So yeah, it's no surprise that when the Baseball Hall of Fame opened its doors, he was one of the very first 5 guys to get in. But a legend like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. His origin story is full of hardship and one of the most unbelievable transformations you'll ever hear. So the question is, how on earth did a troubled kid from Baltimore become a global icon? Well, let's get into it. So our story doesn't start on some pristine baseball diamond. Nope, it starts on the rough streets of Baltimore. This is part 1, an incorrigible beginning.
Okay, think about this. At just 7 years old, when most of us are learning to ride a bike, George Herman Ruth was shipped off to a reform school, basically an orphanage. His dad owned a saloon, and with nobody really watching him, young George was just running wild. The official record literally branded him as Incorrable, a lost cause. He'd end up spending most of the next 12 years of his life there.
And this comparison right here, it says it all. On the left, you've got a teenager at St. Mary's, looking like any other kid who's had a tough start. And then on the right, just a few short years later, he's a star pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. The jump from a boy with no future to a professional athlete, it's just incredible.
So what was the turning point? It was one guy, a man named Brother Matthias. He saw something special in this troubled kid that nobody else did and became his mentor. This was the moment that changed absolutely everything for Ruth. He later said, "I think I was born as a hitter the first day I ever saw him hit a baseball."
And that mentorship didn't just save him, it launched a career that would change baseball forever. But here's the thing a lot of people forget. Before he was the Sultan of Swat, he was something totally different, an ace on the mound.
I mean, his rise was just crazy fast. In 1914, he gets signed by the minor league Orioles, straight out of St. Mary's. Then, in what felt like the blink of an eye, he's sold to the Boston Red Sox. His major league career was on, not as a slugger, but as one of the best left-handed pitchers in the entire game.
And let me tell you, he wasn't just a pitcher. This guy was a monster on the mound. He led the Red Sox to 3 World Series titles. In 1916, his ERA was a ridiculous 1.75, the best in the league. And in the World Series, he pitched almost 30 straight innings without giving up a single run. That record stood for over 40 years. He was basically untouchable. Okay, so this is where the whole story takes a wild turn. By 1918, Ruth is still this elite pitcher, right? But he's also becoming a beast at the plate, hitting for a .300 average and tying for the league lead in homers. The guy was just too good a hitter to only play every few days. He wanted to hit every day.
And that desire would lead to maybe the single most important moment in baseball history. A moment that came from a record-shattering season and ended with a trade that completely altered 2 franchises forever.
29. In 1919, now that he was hitting more often, Babe Ruth didn't just break the single-season home run record, he completely destroyed it, hitting 29 out of the park. Now you have to understand, in an era where home runs were rare, this was insane. He wasn't just hitting more homers than other players, he was hitting more home runs than entire teams. It made him a national sensation overnight.
$100,000. After that record-breaking season, in a move that still makes you shake your head, the Red Sox owner, who, get this, needed cash to fund his Broadway plays, sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees for that much money. It was the most anyone had ever paid for a player, and it would go down as the biggest blunder in the history of sports.
And the fallout from this one sale? It was immediate and legendary. For Boston, a team that had won 5 championships,
It kicked off an 86-year title drought that became known as the Curse of the Bambino. And for the Yankees, who had never won a thing, they had just landed the man who would build their entire dynasty. It was, hands down, the sports steal of the century.
And this is where the legend is truly forged. In the pinstripes of the New York Yankees, Babe Ruth would not only build a dynasty, but he would ring in a whole new era of baseball.
The impact was instantaneous. His first year in New York, 1920, the Yankees are shattering attendance records. People were flooding into stadiums all across the country, not just to see a baseball game, but to see him. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was a must-see event.
And this is probably his biggest legacy, right here. Ruth's insane power fundamentally changed the DNA of baseball. Before him, the game was this low-scoring, strategic game called the dead ball era. But Ruth personally ushered in the live ball era, turning baseball into the home run hitting spectacle we all know and love today.
And with Ruth leading the way, the championships just started rolling in. The Yankees won their first ever World Series in 1923. In 27, as the terrifying anchor of that legendary Murderers Row lineup, he hits an unbelievable 60 home runs. By the time he was done in New York, he had brought 4 titles to the city.
You know, if you really want to see the impact of that trade in black and white, just look at this chart. Before Ruth, the Red Sox were a dynasty with 5 championships. The Yankees, a big fat 0. After the trade, a complete and total reversal of fortune. This one player didn't just change a team, he literally shifted the balance of power in the entire sport for decades.
But here's the thing. Ruth's story is so much bigger than just baseball stats and championships. It's about his legacy as a true American legend.
I mean, the guy was just larger than life, you know? His love of hot dogs and nightlife, his almost superhuman talent, it made him a totally new kind of celebrity. He was this flawed, totally relatable hero, and America just could not get enough. He became one of the first and greatest sports heroes we've ever had, a guy whose name is still the gold standard for greatness.
So all of this brings us to one final, massive question. When you really think about it, his journey from a reform school reject to a pitching phenom, from a legendary slugger to a cultural icon who basically saved the game of baseball, you have to ask yourself, was Babe Ruth the most transformative athlete in American history?